Hey guys, it's Wes. A question I get asked a lot is how do I evaluate a cryptocurrency and what do I think about it? I love the question because let's be honest, there are hundreds of new crypto projects, tokens, currencies, and platforms coming out seemingly every single month. How can we sort through the ones that are of interest to us, and how can we vet and evaluate what's good for us? Well, I can't fully answer that question for you, but what I can provide you is my own rubric, my own grading and scale system that I kind of work through as I evaluate a cryptocurrency or a project to see if it's right for me. In this video, I'm going to cover that, and we're going to lead into some very interesting results, and I definitely need your comments and insights, so don't go anywhere. All that and much more coming right up. Hey guys, it's Wes Spencer. Thank you so much for joining us today as we talk about my 5 key criteria that I use to vet a cryptocurrency project. Now, here's why I think this is important. So if you've never met me before, I am an investor, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm also a cybersecurity guy. So I've had a lot of opportunities, especially after my last company sold, to look at investments of new companies. And I find myself in conversations with them quite a bit. And there's a number of questions I've learned that I like to ask to understand, hey, does this company have potential? Are there red flags here? Is this something I may want to invest in from just the investor's VC perspective? What does this whole thing look like? And I've noticed for me that's bled into cryptocurrency as well. I use a lot of the same mechanics, a lot of the same questions to understand the crypto projects I'm looking at, to understand, is this something I want to invest in? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And by the way, if this is the first time we've ever met, hey there, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. It really does do a lot for me and for my channel, and it would mean a lot to me if you would do that. All right, that's all I'm going to say for that on this video. So let's jump right into the first thing I look for, and that is transparency. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, there's a lot of ways transparency can be conveyed, and there's a lot of ways the lack thereof with transparency can be a huge red flag. So let's discuss just a little bit. One of the first things I look for is a good white paper. Now, when I say good white paper, like, I'm an old professor. I used to teach some InfoSec classes. I'm not talking about like clean and clear, perfect APA guidelines, American English. I'm not looking for that. If this is a crypto project from overseas, maybe some friends across the pond, so to speak, I'm okay if it's not perfectly grammatically correct, but I am looking for some in-depth knowledge. I want to make sure the founders and creators of the project really understand the problem that they're solving, and they understand how their solution provides insights and capabilities to fix those issues. I hope that makes sense. So when I see a white paper that seems to gloss over important details, when I see a white paper that misses things, or that I just inherently disagree with what they're talking about, those are transparency issues that I am looking to solve for. So I personally really do put a lot of weight in white papers to understand the project. So when you guys say, hey Wes, have you ever heard of XYZ crypto or whatever the project is? First thing I typically do if I have interest in it is I go look at the white paper. And if it's missing or short or just way too much brevity on important details, that's a big red flag for me, and certainly something I'm concerned about. Now, the second piece on transparency is this. I also love open source. It doesn't have to be open source, but open source just means anybody can look at the project. And really, Satoshi, when he kicked off Bitcoin in the early days in 2008 and 2009, he really truly put his money where his mouth is, so to speak. He talked about it being a decentralized ecosystem, and so because of that, he said this should be open source, and if anyone wants to review the code for the node itself, for Bitcoin itself, you can go and look at it. And to this day, Bitcoin is still open source. Many projects are open source, not all. And it doesn't have to be open source. It could be a totally proprietary project, maybe like Ripple, or another good example would be a lot of the exchanges like Gemini, Coinbase, Kraken, Voyager. Certainly all of the mechanics of the exchange are not open source. So it's not critical that it's open source, but it is important to me, typically speaking, and is a good plus point to me when I see an open source project, because I know myself and my peers can take a look at the code and understand exactly what it's doing. And if there are issues, there are concerns, which more on that in a minute, we'll know a lot more about it. So that is why transparency is really important. Now, the second thing, founder credibility. Here's why I think founder credibility is important. This goes right back to when I'm vetting companies I may want to invest in as a venture capitalist. I ask certain questions, just trying to understand who the founders are. They don't have to come from success. So as an example, with my company Perch, when we started that, we had no founder credibility at all. We had never created or run a company before like this. It was brand new to us. And so I actually have a heart for companies that don't really have the founder credibility from just doing this before, but I am looking for credibility in other ways. Especially in crypto projects where anybody can create a crypto and you never put your name behind it. It's this dubious, nefarious, person from, who knows who it is in the background. Those are concerning to me. It's definitely a red flag. Let me give you an example. In this channel, I cover a lot of the MMCs, the mobile mining cryptos. It's kind of what I've coined this group of cryptos like B Network, Pi, TimeStop, Eagle Network, a bunch of those that are out there. Well, some of them have founder credibility and transparency and some don't. So as an example, I know who the founders of the Pi Network are. I can look up details on who the founders of TimeStop are, but B Network, I have no idea who they are. They've never disclosed themselves. Do they have to disclose them? No, but I think it's important when you put your name behind a company, there's less risk of you doing something nefarious down the road. Does that make sense? So I love seeing some amount of credibility from the founder's perspective to say, I'm going to lead from the front. I'm going to tell you who I am because I am really putting my reputation behind this. We call this putting skin in the game. And I look for that in companies that I invest in. I want to make sure that the founders understand that and are truly bought into the success. And I want to see the same thing, generally speaking, in crypto projects as well. So if I don't know who they are and there's no information about them, immediate red flag. Now, there are some ways we can get around that. For example, look at the burn tokens that I cover, those deflationary coins like SafeMoon and FEG and some of those that are out there. While we have no idea who the founders are, a couple things we do know, they on the transparency side, the first thing I mentioned, they're super forthright. You can see the contract itself and see the data and details. And so that definitely offsets. So I really do want to know who the founders are because that gives me the insight that I need to really evaluate a project. So that is number 2. Number 3 is this: runway, or what we call funding. So in the startup world, when we say, hey, what's your runway? What we're asking is, how long can your company go with current funds before you run out? Is it a month? Is it a year? How are you doing? Well, a lot of crypto projects are the same way. We need to have some idea of how is this thing being funded? Is it being funded by an ICO? I typically don't like ICOs, and there's reasons here in the States that we have disallowed getting involved in ICOs because they can oftentimes be very, very, very slimy, kind of like a shell company spun up overnight with great ideas, lofty vision, throw out an ICO, and then it's a rug pull. Nothing happens, the rug is pulled from under you, the project is gone, and they just got a whole bunch of funding for something. That can and does happen. So I look for things like that. Is it ICO funded? Is it venture capitalist funded? One thing I love in the crypto space, there are a bunch of venture capitalist focused companies specifically investing in blockchain technology. I love that. It shows that this industry is truly, truly growing into its own. So are they coming from that? Is it bootstrapped? Is the co-founders of the project, again, especially if they're transparent, let us know who they are. They say, hey, look, we're building this on our own. We don't need any kind of money for this thing until this thing gets up and going. How is that being funded? Sometimes, in the case of Pi Network as an example, the developers have a bunch of Pi set aside for themselves as developers. Not necessarily a wrong or evil or bad thing. It's just a way of saying we're going to push this into the future, and that's where our funding is going to come from with success. And I like that oftentimes, and it shows that the developers are heavily invested to make sure this particular project takes off so that their wealth is generated on the heels of that success. So I look for those things. Where does their funding come from? Or do they have funding? Do they have a runway? And in what ways is it working for them? That's an important piece for me. And certainly the number 3 thing I look for is the runway or the funding background for that project. And fourthly, this is a reason you probably come to this channel, is product market fit. Now this, of all of the other 3 I talked about, by far, this is the most subjective. See, every time an investor is talking to a potential company that they may want to put some money in with, they're thinking through this idea of product market fit. Does this thing actually solve something that the market wants? Is it just a clone or a copycat providing no value? Is it an interesting company trying to solve a problem that actually doesn't exist and no one invests in? The vast majority of startups fail. And the reason they fail is because they have not truly gotten to what I call product market fit. They have not truly been able to demonstrate, hey, the thing that we're trying to solve here really addresses a need. Let me give you an example of all of this. Way before the days of rideshare, you ever ride in a cab? I know I have. I never liked the experience. Well, this company called Uber came along and said, you know what, we're going to try to disrupt that industry. We believe that entire market is ready for disruption. People don't like cabs, and there's a better way to do it. Now, in the early days, they had to prove product market fit. Imagine going to an investor and saying, we have this idea of an app that will let you just ride in some stranger's car. Like, that would normally be like, no way, I would never allow that. It sounds crazy at the time. But Uber had to work towards demonstrating we have an app that works. We have at least a test market we've proven there's interest in, and now we're building revenue out of it. And that is how Uber grew into a product market fit that demonstrated, yes, while a crazy idea, we actually proved this thing worked. Now, there is always some amount of speculation in this, especially for crypto. Is that particular crypto going to work? Is it going to succeed? Is it going to fail? I might think it will succeed. You might disagree, or vice versa. This is very speculative, but I do look for product market fit. Let me give you an example of one that I've covered before in this channel that I think is pretty interesting is Basic Attention Token, BAT, from the creators of Brave. The reason I like it is I think it does solve a problem in the market. I think companies like Google take way too much of our private personal information and monetize that. You know, I've talked about that as a security person on this channel before. I love how Brave is trying to upset that by saying, why don't we incentivize people to use our platform? They can generate BAT as a token, and in return, we will give them ads. And it's not based on information we have to mine about them. I think that's brilliant. Now, does it have product market fit? Not quite yet. I mean, BAT has now grown at the time of this video to over $1. That's awesome. When I first started buying it, it was in the cents. So that's a really good thing. And I saw that in the early days. I said, that looks like an interesting one to me. I'm going to buy many thousands of this one. I want to see what happens with it. And fast forward to today, it's doing great. So that's just an example of, you got to kind of think through it and say, do I really think this solves a problem? And it's subjective. It's difficult. It goes on prior past experiences that you have. And you can evaluate that as well by the other things I talked about, the transparency, the founder credibility, all of that. So product market fit is very difficult to determine if it's really there or not, but it certainly is an interesting thing and one of my key criteria. And fifthly, lastly, the last one to talk about is this: outside credibility. Are there others that are talking about it? This can come in many forms and fashions. Let me give you an example. You look at a lot of those burn tokens I talked about earlier in this video, and because there's not a lot of transparency in who the creators and the founders are, one of the things a lot of the legitimate ones do is they actually provide their contract up to third-party review groups like War on Rugs. If you've never checked their Twitter out, go check them out. I'll put them a link in the description down below so you can see them. They'll do contract reviews. They can't prove like product market fit is there, but they can prove things like, yes, the developers did give up all of their shares and all of their tokens when they created this thing. Or yes, we see no evidence of a rug pull. We don't think they're going to have the ability to go seize back tokens. Things like that that are really important just for the credibility to say, I can trust this project and I really don't think this thing is some kind of fly-by-night scam, so to speak. So that's a way you can see it. Other ways you may see it, take Celsius, for example. Celsius, I've covered them a lot in my videos, and I'm a big fan of what Celsius is doing. They provide some of that third-party transparency in other way, audits. You can see the data in those audits. You can see how many people in the community are investing. You can see they have insurance pools that exist. There are third-party things that are involved that let us get involved to say, okay, they do care about the project. There are others that are looking over to make sure it's legitimate. So this idea of outside credibility can come from a lot of different ways. And even if I can humbly say this, yours truly on this channel, I like to cover cryptos that I believe in. I will try my best to never cover a crypto that's going to go under. It may happen. And you may watch this video in the future after I filmed this and said, well, Wes, that one crypto you really liked is gone, totally defunct now. I can't control that totally. But my job here is to be as transparent as I can be because my name is behind this channel. And if I cover a token that I really like or a project I really like, there are reasons for it. And I definitely don't want to see you get involved in something that doesn't work well for you either. So there you are, the 5 key criteria I look for in a successful crypto project. The very first thing is transparency in the project itself. The second thing that I look for is information on the founders themselves, what kind of credibility they have. The third thing I look for is funding or runway, where it's coming from and how it's being generated. The fourth thing that I'm always looking for is just that product market fit that I think is pretty important for us to understand, is this thing going to be successful? And then lastly, fifthly, is outside credibility. So in my next video that I'm going to cover, when I get back into this, I'm going to take the MMCs. I'm going to take Pi, TimeStop, B, Eagle, and I'm going to walk you through how I evaluate each of those along with my criteria and my decisioning. It's just mine personally. And they may change, I may update and edit them, but I'm going to give you a walkthrough of how I evaluate those and why I decide to invest and put my time into certain ones of those and not others. So I'd love to know your thoughts about this. Are there any that you additionally like to use when you're vetting a crypto project of some kind? I'd love to know what that category is because, hey, I may steal from you, if I can so humbly say that, or borrow it or use it because I may have interest in adding to my own criteria. Maybe right now it's 5, maybe eventually it'll be 6 or 7, who knows? But I'm going to use this to standardize my video. So I'd love to know what you think in this review. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Would you add anything or add some clarity to it? Let me know. And hey guys, while you are at it, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, would you do that for me? It does go a long way in my channel like I promised. Until next time, my friends, I will see you later.